I never imagined that a simple swipe right could change my entire life. When I matched with Ethan Hayes on a chilly Chicago night, I thought it was just another date to laugh through and forget after a week. But Ethan wasn't like the others. He had this rare way of paying attention, like you were the only person in the room who mattered. I was 28, working in corporate communications at an IT firm, thinking life was a predictable routine of deadlines, meetings, and the lonely glow of my laptop screen. Ethan showed up like spring after a long winter, warm, unexpected, and terrifyingly hopeful. Our first date happened in a tucked-away coffee shop in River North. I walked in early, anxious and overthinking, and there he was, lean, dark hair, shy smile, a book in hand. He stood up when I approached, which caught me off guard because men didn't do that anymore. He asked questions most people avoided. What scares you? What do you hope people remember about you? As if he wasn't afraid of depth. By the time I walked home that night, Chicago's lights felt softer, the air warmer. I told my best friend Claire, I think I met someone different. Weeks turned into months. Ethan wasn't perfect, but he was intentional. Flowers for no reason, texts that weren't generic, dates planned around my favorite things. He met my parents in Detroit and somehow charmed my strict mother in 10 minutes. Love crept in quietly, like sunlight slowly filling a room. After 9 months, he suggested we move in together. It wasn't a dramatic proposal. He just looked at me while folding laundry and said, "Life makes more sense when you're around." We signed a lease for a 2-bedroom apartment overlooking Lincoln Park. That first week felt like a movie montage, cooking together, fighting over shelf space, racing to the elevator. We created rituals. Sunday pancakes, midweek rooftop sunsets, Friday wine and documentaries. But like most stories that turn dark, the unraveling began so subtly that I didn't recognize it as unraveling. First, the small withdrawals. Ethan started spending longer hours at work. Conversations became shorter, fragmented, rehearsed. He smiled less, laughed rarely. I told myself this was normal. Life isn't a movie. People have bad days. But bad days turned into weeks, weeks into months. He stopped asking the deep questions. When I asked mine, he brushed them away. "It's just stress, Emily," he said. "I'm fine." But nothing about us felt fine. The first crack that made noise happened on our 2nd anniversary. I planned a rooftop dinner, candles, lights, the whole cinematic scene. He came home late and didn't look touched by effort. He hugged me, but it felt like hugging a coat hanger, present but empty. "Let's eat before it gets cold," he said. I remember staring at the skyline and wondering if I'd imagined the version of him I fell for. Then came the late-night calls he wouldn't explain. The weekends spent with co-workers he never named. The locked phone, the rare affection, the vanishing eye contact. One night, at 2:14 a.m., I woke to find him sitting in the kitchen, head in hands. His shoulders shook, silent and broken. I approached gently. "What's going on? Talk to me." His voice was razor thin. "I don't want to hurt you, Emily." I reached for him, but he pulled away. "I can fix anything if you tell me what's wrong," I whispered. He shook his head, got up, walked past me, and closed the bedroom door. That moment, the way he moved away instead of toward, felt like foreshadowing. 3 weeks later, I discovered the truth. It was a random afternoon. I was organizing the spare room closet, the one where he stored old notebooks and documents. A small envelope slipped out from between folders. Inside were printed emails, photos, messages. I shouldn't have read them, but I did. And with each line, the ground beneath my life cracked. There was another woman. Her name was Lauren. They'd reconnected 6 months prior. She was his grad school girlfriend, the one who had broken him once. He never told me that she was back in his life. Their messages weren't vague. He wrote things he hadn't said to me in over a year. "I still love you. I've made mistakes. I don't know how to choose." Shock wasn't loud. It was silent, paralyzing. I sat on the floor staring at the pages. My heart didn't break dramatically. It deflated, quietly folding in on itself. When Ethan came home, I didn't scream. I simply placed the envelope on the counter. "Tell me everything," I said. His reaction wasn't guilt, it was relief, and that hurt most. He confessed what I already knew. Lauren had resurfaced, and he couldn't let go. He didn't want 2 lives, but couldn't choose, so he chose indecision, cowardice disguised as confusion. I didn't cry then. I listened, and when he was done, I said only one sentence. "Love doesn't disappear. It gets replaced." He moved out 2 days later. The apartment echoed with absence. His chair, his mugs, his side of the closet, all empty. Friends brought wine and sympathy, but nights were brutal. I kept replaying memories, wondering where the shift began, what sign I ignored. Months passed. Therapy helped. Work numbed. And slowly, weirdly, the air stopped suffocating. The hardest part wasn't that Ethan left. It was that love stayed. Love lived in the chair he always sat in the coffee mugs he never took, in the way I instinctively rolled to his side of the bed. Grief is bizarre. It doesn't announce itself. It just starts existing inside you. I convinced myself I was fine. I smiled too much, worked too hard, refused to admit to anyone that I was drowning quietly in a familiar emptiness. Claire, my best friend since college, saw through it. One night she barged into my apartment without warning, carrying takeout and stern eyes. "You need to stop pretending," she said. "I'm not pretending." Her silence told me she didn't buy it. She ate sitting cross-legged on the floor, our usual spot, and after a while asked something I had avoided. "Do you miss him, or the life you thought you had with him?" I hated that she was right. I missed certainty, partnership, the idea of us, not the man who walked away. That night, I let myself cry for the first time. It wasn't cinematic. It was raw, ugly, quiet. Afterward, I slept for 16 hours, as if my body finally stopped fighting what it already knew. Time didn't heal everything, but it hardened me in places that used to be soft. I started running every morning, not because I liked running, but because it forced air into my lungs and movement into my day. It reminded me I existed beyond abandonment. Work became distraction. I got promoted unexpectedly to lead communications on a federal tech initiative, a demanding role I almost turned down. Claire talked me into accepting it. "You need something that belongs only to you," she told me. She was right. For months, life was stable, quiet but bearable. Loneliness and independence coexisted, sometimes peacefully, sometimes painfully. Then, like every story that insists on unfinished business, Ethan returned. It was a rainy Thursday evening. Chicago was drenched, city lights blurred through water. I had just stepped out of a rideshare when a familiar voice whispered behind me, "Emily." I froze, not because I recognized the voice, but because some part of me had hoped never to hear it again. He stood under an awning across the street, hands shoved into pockets, hair longer, thinner around the eyes. He looked like time had been unkind. "I didn't know where else to go," he said. I wanted to walk away, but curiosity kept me rooted. He approached slowly, as if afraid I would disappear. "Lauren is gone," he murmured. "Gone?" The word hung between us, heavy, empty, pathetic. "She left?" I asked. He nodded. "She said she didn't want a man who abandons people." The irony punched me harder than the rain. Ethan looked at me the way he used to, softly, searchingly. But this time, it didn't reach me. "I made mistakes," he whispered. "I know that now." I didn't say anything. He studied my face, desperate for some opening. "Do you hate me?" he asked. I thought carefully. "No," I said eventually. "I don't hate you, but I don't know you anymore." That honesty hurt him more than anger. He asked to talk, maybe grab a coffee. Every survival instinct in me screamed no, but closure, the silent monster in my chest, wanted answers. We sat at the same cafe where our first date happened. Different season, different versions of us. He confessed everything. He was insecure, afraid of failing, terrified of commitment. He sought out Lauren when life felt too ordinary, chasing the illusion of unfinished love. In the end, she didn't want him, but he came back to me not because he loved me, but because he didn't know where else to turn. That truth was liberating. I listened until the rain stopped, then said what he least expected. "I'm glad you told me all this, not because I want you back, but because now I know it never had anything to do with me." His eyes widened. "It was never my job to heal you," I added. "You didn't break me. You revealed me." When I stood to leave, he grabbed my wrist gently. "Emily, please, I can be better." I pulled away. Maybe, but not with me. I walked out of the cafe without looking back. For the first time in months, leaving didn't feel like losing. It felt like choosing. A week later, I booked a solo trip to Seattle, a city I had always wanted to see but never did because Ethan didn't like rain. The flight was turbulent, but my mind was unusually calm. Sometimes emotional storms prepare you for physical ones. Seattle greeted me with mist, coffee, and anonymity. No one knew my story. No one expected anything. I could be whoever I wanted. I hiked trails alone, ate dinner with strangers, watched ferries glide across the Sound. One afternoon, I sat on a bench overlooking the water when an elderly woman sat beside me. "You look like someone learning how to start over," she said gently. I smiled. The comment was too accurate. "How do you know?" She tapped her chest. "You carry endings differently in your shoulders." We talked about love, loss, regret. She told me she had been widowed twice, yet learned that life keeps asking us to show up anyway. "You don't heal by forgetting," she said. "You heal by remembering you matter even without them." Her words were simple, but stayed with me. When I flew back to Chicago, something subtle had shifted. Not everything was fixed, but everything was possible. Ethan reached out twice. I ignored him both times. Not because I was angry, but because the chapter had closed. A few months later, something happened that truly changed me. It was an ordinary evening when I decided to clean old storage boxes. While sorting through memories, I found a journal I used to keep before I met Ethan. Pages filled with goals, dreams, ambitions. I had forgotten her, the version of me who existed before heartbreak. I reread those pages and cried, not from sadness, but recognition. I wasn't healing. I was returning. That night, I wrote something new in the back of the notebook. Love didn't abandon me. I abandoned myself trying to be loved. And with that admission, freedom finally arrived. The next morning, I walked into work differently. People noticed. My boss later asked if I'd consider speaking at a women's leadership event about resilience and emotional recovery in careers. I almost laughed. Me talking about resilience? But then I said yes, because even if pain wasn't my choice, growth could be. The women's leadership event was held in a glass-walled conference center downtown, the kind of place with polished floors, filtered water dispensers, and inspirational quotes framed on the walls. I almost backed out 3 times. Once when I saw my name printed on the speaker list. Once when I caught my reflection in the restroom mirror. And once when I stepped onto the small stage and saw rows of faces watching me expectantly. I wasn't a best-selling author or a CEO. I was just a woman who had survived a heartbreak she never expected. The moderator introduced me as Emily Carter, communications lead and advocate for emotional resilience at work. The title sounded bigger than the person wearing it. I stepped up to the podium, cleared my throat, and told myself the truth. I wasn't there to impress them. I was there to be honest. I used to think heartbreak lived in one place, I began, in the chest, in the space where a relationship used to be. But I learned that heartbreak is sneaky. It seeps into everything. How you show up to work, how you answer emails, how you look at yourself in the mirror. It doesn't clock out at 5 p.m. The room grew quiet. I told them about Ethan without using his name, about the apartment, the slow distance, the late-night calls, the envelope, the other woman. I didn't dramatize. I didn't villainize. I just told the truth the way it happened. And the hardest part, I said, wasn't that he left. It was that I stayed with a version of myself I no longer recognized. I shrank to fit inside someone else's uncertainty. Heads nodded. A few women had tears in their eyes. Some looked like they were holding their breath. I spoke about therapy, about running, about the trip to Seattle, about the journal and the realization that I had abandoned myself long before anyone else did. I'm not here to tell you that time heals everything, I said. Time doesn't heal if you keep reopening the same wound. What heals is choice. Choosing to not call them. Choosing to not stalk their life online. Choosing to build routines that belong to you. Choosing to believe that your story doesn't end where somebody else leaves. When I stepped off the stage, my hands were trembling, but my chest felt lighter. Women approached me afterward. One said, "I left an engagement 6 months ago. I thought I ruined my life. Hearing you made me feel less crazy." Another whispered, "I'm still with him, but now I know why I feel so tired all the time." They weren't thanking me for being strong. They were thanking me for being honest. Later, as I gathered my notes, a man from the event staff approached me. He had a camera strap around his neck and a press badge clipped to his jacket. "That was powerful," he said. "I'm Noah, by the way. I handle media for these events. We recorded your talk. It came out really well. Have you ever thought about doing more of this?" I laughed softly. "More public crying in front of strangers?" He smiled. "More telling the truth. People need to hear it." We talked for a few minutes about communication, authenticity, how social media is full of polished illusions but starved of honesty. He asked if I'd be open to letting the organization share my talk on their online platform. "Sure," I agreed, then hesitated. As long as it's not framed as woman abandoned by boyfriend, I'd rather it be woman learns to not abandon herself. "That's a much better headline," he said. "Done." I gave him my email and left, not expecting anything more. But the universe has a strange way of multiplying whatever you choose to offer honestly. 2 weeks later, the video went live. I didn't even know at first. I only realized when my inbox began filling with subject lines that all started the same way. "I saw your talk. Women from different states, a few from other countries, some my age, some older, some younger. They shared pieces of their stories, Long marriages ending suddenly, fiancés who changed their minds, partners who walked out, partners they finally left. One line kept repeating in different forms. I thought I was the only one who felt this way. Reading their messages felt like sitting in a giant invisible room full of people quietly raising their hands. I began responding to each email personally, not with advice, just with acknowledgement. I hear you. You're not alone. You're not crazy. You matter even now. No one had said those words to me when my heart first shattered. It felt right to offer them to someone else. Noah emailed next. Your talk is performing really strongly online, he wrote. If you're open to it, I think you could build something bigger out of this. A column, a blog, maybe even a podcast or storytelling series. I stared at the screen, unsure. Part of me wanted to say, I'm not qualified. Another part whispered, who said you need a certificate to tell the truth? We met for coffee to discuss it. He brought rough ideas. I brought fear and a notebook. You're in communications, he reminded me. You help shape messages for companies every day. Why not shape one for people who feel lost the way you did? What would I even call it? I asked. He thought for a moment. What did you write in your journal that night? I flipped through photos on my phone until I found the image I had taken of that page. The line stared back at me. Love didn't abandon me. I abandoned myself trying to be loved. He tapped the phrase on my screen. Right there, he said. That's the core. What if you built something around learning how not to abandon yourself? We brainstormed names until one stuck, returning to myself. A simple concept, weekly written reflections and occasional recorded stories about heartbreak, healing, boundaries, self-worth. Not from a therapist, not from a guru, from someone in the middle of it like everyone else. I launched the project quietly, just a simple website and a newsletter. No big announcements, no flashy branding. I shared it with the women who had written to me, and they shared it with others. Within a few months, hundreds subscribed, then thousands. They weren't following me because I had all the answers. They were following because I admitted that I didn't, but was willing to ask better questions. Slowly, the narrative of my life shifted. In the beginning, everything started with Ethan, the breakup, the therapy, the trip, the speech. But somewhere along the way, the story stopped revolving around a man who left and started centering on the woman who stayed. Me. One afternoon, almost a year after the leadership event, I left my office early to walk home. The air was clear, the city buzzing with a summer kind of restlessness. At a crosswalk, I heard a familiar voice say my name. Emily? I turned and saw him. Ethan. He looked different. Older. Tired. The confident ease replaced by something fragile. For a second, time folded back on itself, and I was standing in that rooftop apartment again, watching him pack his things. Hey, I said calmly. He blinked, as if surprised I wasn't startled or angry or teary. "How have you been?" he asked. "Good," I answered, and I meant it. We made small talk for a moment. He told me he was working at a smaller firm now, that things hadn't quite gone as planned. There was no mention of Lauren, just an implied absence. He hesitated, then said, "I saw a video of you talking about heartbreak at some conference. A friend sent it to me. I knew it was about us." I didn't deny it. "It was about my experience," I said. "But it wasn't just about us. It was about how I reacted to everything." He looked at me with an odd mixture of regret and admiration. "You're different," he said softly. "Stronger, I guess." "I'm just more myself," I replied. He shifted his weight, as if debating whether to say more. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," he finally offered. "Not because I hope anything changes. I can tell you've moved on. But I needed to say it out loud. You didn't deserve how I treated you. Once upon a time, those words would have reopened everything. Tonight, they landed gently and stayed on the surface." "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate that." We stood there, two people at a crosswalk that used to be a crossroads. The light turned green. People flowed around us like water. "I have to go," I told him. "Take care of yourself, Ethan." He nodded. "You too, Emily." "Really?" I walked away. I didn't look back this time. Not out of defiance, but because there was nothing back there I needed. A few months later, I was recording an episode for my storytelling project. It wasn't fancy, just me in my apartment, a decent microphone, and a script open on my laptop. The episode title, "The Day I Stopped Waiting for an Apology." I talked about running into Ethan, about what it felt like to hear the words, "I'm sorry," after I no longer needed them. "We think apologies are keys," I said into the microphone. "We wait for them, like they'll unlock a door and free us." But I realized something standing at that crosswalk. I had already walked through the door. His apology didn't set me free. I had set myself free months before, the night I decided to stop abandoning myself. I paused, listening to the quiet apartment around me. "If you're listening to this," I continued, "and you're waiting for someone to say they're sorry, I hope you get it. I really do. But I also hope you don't put your healing on hold until they finally do the bare minimum." I closed my eyes and imagined all the people who might hear this later, lying in bed, sitting in their car, walking alone with headphones. "You deserve to move forward, even if they never acknowledge what they did," I said. "You deserve to wake up one morning and realize their silence no longer controls your life. You deserve to choose yourself today, not someday." I stopped the recording. For a moment, I simply sat there, letting my own words sink in, not as a script, but as a reality I was still learning to live. The strangest part of healing is that you don't always notice it happening. You just wake up one day and realize that the story that used to define you is now just one chapter among many. That weekend, Claire and I met at our usual brunch spot. "You seem lighter," she observed as she stirred her coffee. "I ran into Ethan," I said. Her eyes widened. "And?" "And nothing," I shrugged. "We talked for a minute. He apologized. I went home and made pasta." She studied my face, then smiled. "Look at you. Growth." We raised our glasses of orange juice in a mock toast. "To loving ourselves," she said. "To not abandoning ourselves," I added. We clinked glasses. I didn't know what the future held, if I would fall in love again, with whom, when, or how. I didn't know what city I might live in 5 years from now, what job title I might hold, what unexpected losses might still be waiting for me. But for the first time in a long time, the uncertainty didn't terrorize me. It invited me. Because now I knew that no matter who entered or exited my life, I was no longer willing to walk away from myself. And that realization, quiet, steady, and unromantic, was the real love story I had been searching for all along.